How to format dialogue. If you're writing a short story, you may want to include dialogue between the characters. Writing dialogue can be tricky because of all the special rules that apply. Let's go through them one by one. Rule number 1. Place quotation marks around the part of the sentence that is spoken. Our first example, "Where's your pet dog?" he asked. The spoken part is "Where's your pet dog?" She replied, "My grandfather is taking him for a walk." What's the part that's spoken? My grandfather is taking him for a walk. And our third example, "You're not serious," he said. The part that's spoken, "You're not serious." Rule number 2. Make sure that the first word of the spoken part begins with a capital letter. In examples A and C, the first words of the spoken parts already begin with capital letters because they appear at the beginning of our sentences. But we must capitalize "my" in example B. Rule number 3. Decide on the correct punctuation mark to place after the spoken part, and place it inside the quotation marks. Example A involves a question, "Where's your pet dog?" So a question mark works best. Example B already ends with a period or full stop. Example C might take an exclamation point, unless you believe he is speaking quietly, in which case you would use a comma. Now, you might be wondering why we use a comma here instead of a period. Isn't a period more appropriate because it signals the end of the spoken part? This question leads us to rule number 4. Consider the relationship between the spoken and written parts and add punctuation where necessary. The spoken, "You're not serious," and written, "He said," parts are different but need each other to form a complete sentence. They rely on each other. We signal this with a comma rather than a period between them. This also explains why we add a comma to example B after "she replied," and also why we don't capitalize "he" in example A. The rules may seem unusual and overwhelming, but soon enough you will recognize patterns, such as the following. Have a look at these pieces of dialogue. Now notice what they have in common. The spoken part has a word that begins with a capital letter. Notice that in some of the sentences, the pronouns that follow the spoken part begin with a lowercase letter. And notice the use of commas after "he asked," "she said," and "he replied." And look at how the spoken parts end with question marks, a period, and then a comma, and then 2 exclamation points. Rule number 5. Every time there is a new speaker in a dialogue, you must begin a new paragraph. "Where's your pet dog?" he asked. She replied, "My grandfather is taking him for a walk." "You're not serious," he said. "Did you forget? He's allergic to dogs." Every time you begin a paragraph, be sure to indent. And that's it. You've understood the basics of formatting dialogue. But here's one last tip. Don't place an extra period at the end of the sentence after the punctuation.